In 1973, investigators in Washington asked for a single audio tape from inside the White House. It was a recording of a meeting in the Oval Office between President Richard Nixon and his chief of staff, held just 3 days after the Watergate break-in. On that tape, they expected to hear what the president knew about the crime and how he planned to respond. When they played it back, they found a long, empty gap, 18.5 minutes of missing sound in the middle of the most important conversation of the investigation. The tape did not fail by itself. A person had erased that part and replaced it with buzz and static. Nixon's secretary, Rose Mary Woods, said she had accidentally erased some of it while answering a phone call, but audio experts later showed that the gap had been wiped in many short segments. This was not a single mistake. It was repeated, manual erasing. The White House could not give a clear answer about who removed those minutes or why. The evidence that might have shown a president approving a cover-up had been cut out inside the Oval Office itself. From the start, Watergate showed how far people inside this building were willing to go to protect power. They had a secret taping system that recorded almost everything said near the president. When those tapes became a threat, someone inside the most guarded house in the country altered the record. As you hear that, you can judge for yourself what that says about the way truth is handled behind these walls. The erased tape became a symbol of the scandal, but it was only one moment in a much longer pattern. For over 200 years, the White House has been the setting for fires, hidden illnesses, secret tunnels, intruders, affairs, shredded documents, and presidents who slowly bent under the pressure of the job. It looks like a simple house on television. In reality, it is closer to a long-running crime scene of history where decisions and cover-ups live side by side. To see how deep that pattern goes, you have to start near the beginning, with the day the house almost disappeared. In August 1814, during the War of 1812, British forces marched into the capital after defeating American troops at Bladensburg. They set fire to government buildings across Washington. At the President House, they piled furniture and set it alight. The flames burned through wood and paint, split stone, and collapsed roofs and floors. By the next day, the home of the president was a gutted shell open to the sky. Clerks and local residents had already rushed to remove important records from the city. They took state papers and account books and loaded them onto carts. Some precious documents were saved. Others vanished in the confusion. You can look at that moment and see the start of a long struggle over what survives and what is lost when crisis reaches this house. There was talk of leaving the ruin and moving the capital. Instead, leaders chose to rebuild on the same spot. They kept the stone, walls where they could, patched the damage, and covered it all in thick white paint. From the outside, the scars disappeared, but everyone who worked on the site knew that this place had already been broken once. If you visit today and see the white facade, you can think about that choice to rebuild on top of wreckage rather than start fresh somewhere else. Fire came back more than once. In 1866, a serious blaze damaged the conservatory. In 1929, on Christmas Eve, smoke poured out of the West Wing. A fire in the executive offices spread through attics and walls and gutted the working center of the presidency before firefighters stopped it. President Herbert Hoover watched from nearby as crews battled flames in the place where his staff worked. Once again, the building that was supposed to show steady power was revealed as fragile and poorly protected. Each time, Congress restored what had burned, and the public image returned to normal. From a distance, it looked like nothing had changed. Up close, officials knew the truth was more complicated. You may notice a pattern already forming here. Damage in the open triggers repairs, and then the story is softened afterward. A different kind of threat appeared quietly in the late 1940s. By then, the White House was old and had been remodeled many times. Walls and floors carried the weight of newer beams, added rooms, and heavier objects than the original builders had expected. Staff felt floors sway under their feet and heard ceilings creak above them. There were jokes about ghosts, but the cause was simpler. The structure was failing. In 1948, Margaret Truman was playing the piano in her sitting room on the second floor. One of the legs of the piano suddenly crashed through the floor and punched into the ceiling of the family dining room below. Engineers inspected the building. They found rotted beams, cracked supports, and ceilings that had dropped several inches. They warned that the house was at risk of a serious collapse. The building that represented the strength of the presidency was in danger of literally falling apart. President Harry Truman worried not only about safety, but about optics. It was an election year. He feared that news of a collapsing White House would be used against him as a metaphor for a weak administration. Officials downplayed the full risk at first. Only later did the public learn how close the place had come to disaster. As you picture that piano leg breaking through the floor, you can think about how often you are told the whole truth when the building itself is in trouble. In the end, the family moved out to Blair House across the street. From 1949 to 1952, the White House interior was completely gutted. Only the outer walls remained. Inside, workers installed a new steel frame and rebuilt the floors and rooms. When they were done, the spaces looked familiar again, but beneath the plaster and paint was a different skeleton. The whole process was kept as calm as possible in public, yet it was one of the most extreme repairs ever made to a national symbol. The building survived its structural crises, but the same care was not always shown when the weakness was not in stone, but in flesh. In October 1919, President Woodrow Wilson suffered a massive stroke inside the White House. It left him partly paralyzed and with serious problems in speech and vision. For a time, he was close to death. His doctor, Cary Grayson, and his wife, Edith Wilson, decided that as little as possible about his true condition should reach the public. Edith Wilson took control of almost every piece of paper that reached the president. She chose which memos to show him and which to hold back. She met with cabinet members and lawmakers in his place. She wrote notes and instructions that were presented as his decisions. She later described her role as that of a steward, guiding matters while he recovered. Critics then and later called it an unelected presidency. For roughly a year and a half, the country did not have a fully functioning president in the open sense of the word. There was no clear system yet for handling a disabled leader. The Constitution did not spell out what to do. Congress was never formally told the full truth about Wilson's condition. The public was told he was tired and needed rest. As you think about that, you can decide whether you see this as a careful attempt to protect a sick man or as a direct denial of your right to know who is actually in charge. Wilson's case set a pattern for hiding health issues. Franklin Roosevelt could not walk unaided and used a wheelchair, but images of him standing or seated with hidden braces were carefully staged. His declining heart during the final years of World War II was known to only a small circle. John Kennedy struggled with chronic pain and serious hormone problems. His medical records were kept secret, while the public saw a young, strong leader. The idea that a president must always appear healthy no matter the real picture, became part of the White House culture. When you see a staged image from this house, you can quietly ask yourself what was edited out of the frame. Along with hidden illness came a physical system built to hide people underground when danger came from outside. During World War II, as fear of bombing raids grew, a hardened shelter was built beneath the East Wing. Over time, this space became the Presidential Emergency Operations Center. It is a secure bunker with thick walls, heavy doors, special ventilation, and secure communication lines. Only a small number of staff and officials ever see it. It is meant for moments when leaders cannot safely stay on the main floors. Nearby lies another set of secret rooms, the Situation Room complex under the West Wing. It opened in the early 1960s to give presidents a secure place to monitor crises. It has been expanded and modernized many times since. When foreign wars, terrorist attacks, or hostage situations unfold, presidents and advisors often sit around tables in those underground rooms, looking at screens and maps. From the street outside, you see only a quiet building and some windows. You never see the bunker beneath. On September 11, 2001, senior officials were rushed into the bunker as hijacked planes struck targets on the East Coast. The vice president and others watched live as towers fell and smoke rose from the Pentagon. They spoke to military leaders and made real-time choices. People outside saw only television footage and heard short statements. The most intense discussions took place far below. Knowing that, you can think about how often the true center of an event is hidden under layers of concrete and secrecy, even when the White House appears calm from above. Secret spaces can protect leaders, but they also make it easier to keep decisions away from public view. During the Iran-Contra affair in the 1980s, a small group of officials in the Reagan administration used the National Security Council offices near the White House to run a covert operation. They helped arrange the sale of arms to Iran and used some of the proceeds to fund Contra rebels in Nicaragua, even though Congress had tried to limit that kind of support. When the scheme began to unravel, staff rushed to destroy evidence. Marine officer Oliver North, a key figure on the NSC staff, fed Iran-Contra documents into shredders. His secretary, Fawn Hall, later admitted that she helped hide and destroy files and even carried papers out of the building inside her clothes so they could be burned. Investigators later wrote that she and others had taken part in altering, removing, and destroying official records. The shredders were not out in public. They were in offices linked directly to the White House. The decision to erase evidence was made in the same complex that is supposed to preserve the national record. Years later, even after hearings and reports, some of the details of who knew what at which point remain murky because the paper trail was cut. You can look at that and see how powerful it is when people who control the files also control the machines that can make those files vanish. Watergate and Iran-Contra are often described as political scandals, but they were also scandals of the House itself. The White House as a place made both of them possible. It gave cover, tools, and status to people who felt safe enough to hide things from the country. It helped them, for a time, to believe that rules applied differently on this ground. Corruption and hidden deals have come in more personal forms too. In the early 1920s, President Warren Harding used the building as a social club. He played poker with his friends, drank whiskey in the era of Prohibition, and kept close ties with men who would later be charged in major corruption cases. The Teapot Dome scandal? where Interior Secretary Albert Fall took secret payments from oil companies in exchange for access to federal reserves, exposed how easily government officials could be bought. Harding died before the full story was known, but the mess happened on his watch. His love of friendly gatherings and lax control in the White House created an environment where others felt free to cut deals in the shadows. Stories about his affairs added another layer. Harding's relationship with Nan Britton and other women included claims of meetings in White House rooms. The evidence is debated, but the direction is clear. Private behavior, if exposed during his life, could have changed public trust. It was kept quiet until after his death. When you hear that the same house hosted both official state dinners and secret meetings with lovers, you can think about how thin the wall can be between public duty and private desire. John Kennedy brought a different style to the White House in the early 1960s. The press praised his youth and his family image with Jacqueline Kennedy and their children. At the same time, Kennedy was involved with other women away from the cameras. Some meetings took place inside the mansion or nearby, moved carefully through service corridors and back elevators. Staff kept schedules flexible and doors closed. Kennedy's personal life was not a crime in itself, but the secrecy around it mattered. It helped maintain a false picture of the person in charge. By the 1990s, the media environment had changed. When Bill Clinton began an affair with a young intern, Monica Lewinsky, inside the White House, the old methods of quiet control failed. The relationship, which involved encounters in private spaces near the Oval Office and the study, became the center of a national scandal. Clinton first denied the affair in direct language. Only when detailed evidence appeared did he admit what had happened. He was impeached in the House on charges of perjury and obstruction of justice related to his attempts to hide the truth. He was later acquitted in the Senate, but the damage to the image of the office and the building was deep. You can decide how you weigh that kind of behavior. Some will call it a personal mistake. Others will call it abuse of a power imbalance with a young staff member. Either way, the setting matters. These actions happened in a workplace that belongs to the public. Not all threats came from leaders and their aides. Some came from outside in ways that exposed the vulnerability of the building itself. On September 19, 2014, Omar Gonzalez, an Iraq War veteran with post-traumatic stress disorder, climbed the fence at the North Lawn. He ran straight across the grass toward the White House. Secret Service agents tried to catch him but failed. The front door, which was supposed to be locked, had been left open. Gonzalez entered the building, overpowered one officer, and made it deep into the main floor before he was stopped. Reports later confirmed he reached the East Room, a large ceremonial hall, while carrying a knife. At first, officials said he had been caught just inside the door. Only after more reporting did the full path become clear. An alarm near the entrance had been muted because staff had grown tired of how often it sounded. This incident was not only about one man. It was about a culture of comfort that allowed simple security rules to be ignored inside the most sensitive house in the country. Other intrusions over the years, including a stolen helicopter landing on the lawn and a small plane crash on the property, have shown how fragile the idea of total safety really is here. Every time someone gets too close, the country remembers for a moment that this symbol is also a real building with real flaws. Physical threats and private scandals are one side of the story. Another is the steady pressure that builds on the people who live and work in this space. Lyndon Johnson entered the White House after the assassination of John Kennedy and used his power to push major civil rights laws and social programs. As the war in Vietnam grew, protests outside the gates grew louder. Johnson spent long nights in the House watching news reports, reading casualty numbers, and calling advisors. Witnesses recall him growing more exhausted, angry, and bitter. The weight of war and criticism wore him down. Richard Nixon also changed under pressure. During his last months in office, as the Watergate investigation closed in, staff saw him drinking more, talking to portraits, and swinging between defiance and despair. He argued with aides late into the night, walked the halls, and struggled with the idea that he might have to resign. The building that had once felt like a fortress of control became a place where every room held a memory of a phone call, a meeting, or a taped conversation that could be used against him. More recently, the White House has become a stage for open conflict between leaders and the public. During protests over racial injustice in 2020, law enforcement officers and federal agents used heavy force to clear Lafayette Square just north of the House. Reports later said that the president had briefly been moved to the underground bunker as security tightened. The event sparked a debate about whether the response was focused on safety or on showing strength. It also reminded many people that the House can be both a symbol of freedom and a place that feels closed off and defended against its own citizens. When you see footage of crowds at those fences and armed officers on the grounds, you can think about how different the idea of the people's house looks, depending on which side of the gate you are on. All of these stories connect back to the same simple facts. The White House is not just a pretty building, it is a working center of power. The people who control it have every reason to show only what helps them and to hide what might hurt them. Fires that almost destroyed it were followed by careful rebuilding and managed stories. Structural collapse was handled quietly, while leaders worried about political images. A president's stroke was hidden while his wife managed access to him. Secret tunnels and bunkers allow leaders to operate in safety, but also out of sight. Intruders have exposed security gaps, only for the full details to emerge later. Major scandals like Watergate and Iran-Contra turned on documents, tapes, and files that were altered, blocked, or destroyed inside this compound. Affairs and private crises have been shielded as long as possible, even when they took place a few doors away from the Oval Office. You can notice how often the same pattern shows up. Something dangerous or embarrassing happens. The first instinct inside the house is control, not openness. Information is managed. Damage is limited. Only later, sometimes years later, does the fuller picture come out through hearings, leaks, archives, and memoirs. By then, the people who made the original choices may be gone, but the building remains and carries their marks. The White House has survived an enemy attack, internal decay, political crimes, and public rage. It has housed idealists and cynics. It has seen acts of courage and acts of cowardice. It stands today as a strong symbol because the country needs it that way. At the same time, its history shows how much hidden damage lies behind a smooth image. When you next see the familiar front of the White House on a screen or in a photo, you now know more about what sits behind it. You know about the burned ruins of 1814 under the fresh paint. You know about the collapsing beams Truman had to replace. You know about Wilson lying in bed while Edith Wilson controlled access to power. You know about the bunker under the East Wing, ready for the next unseen emergency. You know about the shredded Iran-Contra papers, the missing minutes on the Nixon tape, the affairs, the intruders, and the presidents who broke down inside these walls. This building is presented as the clean center of American democracy. Its full story is darker. It is a place where leaders have hidden illness, destroyed evidence, and made choices far from the eyes of the people they serve. It holds the record of how power really behaves when it thinks it can act without consequence. In the end, the White House is both a symbol and a warning. It shows what a country wants to believe about itself and what that country is willing to ignore to keep that belief alive. You can choose which part you see first.